Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp. And those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
It's the July 4th sale at Bray & Scarf, going on now with huge savings throughout the store. Save up to 40% on GE Profile and Cafe appliances. Or step up to luxury with free installation on select Monogram appliances. Special financing is available. Shop local and save this July 4th at Bray & Scarf. Visit any of our convenient locations or go to brayandscarf.com, where it doesn't cost more to get more.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It's been over 5 years since COVID-19 put the world on pause. And while you may not see it as often in the headlines, it doesn't mean it's gone away. In fact, the newest variant in the spotlight with a possibly painful symptom, a sore throat described by some like swallowing razor blades. It's known as NB181 variant, quickly becoming common in various regions around the world, seeing it in Canada. But how bad is this strain compared to others? Can we properly protect ourselves? Plus, summer has arrived. We want to know, are there certain viruses that could throw a wrench into those fun plans? I'm Melanie Ng, and in this episode of The Big Story, we get answers to these questions with one of the leading voices in the COVID conversation, infectious diseases specialist, Dr. Isaac Bogoch. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Melanie.
Okay, let's get right to it. Is this a sexy headline, these swallowing razor blades to get everyone's attention, or is this something that we really need to pay attention to, this new variant?
I would frame this as there's nothing new. I mean, we know that the virus, SARS-CoV-2, causes an infection, COVID-19, and we know exactly how it's transmitted. We know who has risk factors for severe illness. To no one's surprise, it's a respiratory virus that causes respiratory viral symptoms, which can be upper respiratory virus, like a sore throat, or lower respiratory virus, like shortness of breath and a cough. So if people want to know what this newer sublineage of Omicron, this newer strain, for lack of a better word, that's circulating, NB 1.81, is going to cause, all you have to do is think about what it was like over the last 3 years. And this is rinse, wash, repeat. Not saying it isn't an issue, for sure, for people with risk factors for severe illness. So the elderly individuals or people with underlying health conditions, like significantly immunocompromising states. Like, these are people that are at risk for severe illness, like hospitalization and even death. But I mean, I think you just have to poke your head outside of the window and look around at the world around you over the last 3 years. Much, not all, but much of it has returned to normal. And yes, the virus is still here. It's not going away. It's never going away, but it's not even remotely coming close to the significant damage and destruction that it caused in 2020 and 2021, and I would say early 2022 as well.
So if this strain should be treated like others, would that mean the current vaccines should protect against this strain?
Yeah. At every point in time in COVID, any vaccine that's been approved in Canada, regardless of the strain that's circulating, would reduce the risk for severe illness like hospitalization and death. And the risk reduction, the most bang for the buck, for lack of a better word, is felt in those with risk factors for severe infection. So said another way, people who are at greatest risk for hospitalization and death, the elderly, immunocompromised, people with significant underlying medical comorbidities. Those are the people that have the most benefit from the vaccine. After 2022, the vaccine has less and less ability to reduce the risk of infection. It still does. It's important to recognize it still reduces the risk of infection. It just doesn't do it as nearly as well as it did when it first rolled out. But what it does still do is prevent severe manifestations of the virus, like hospitalization and death, especially in those who are at greatest risk for hospitalization and death. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, yeah, the vaccines are still going to do exactly what they've done before.
I'm going to assume the uptake is much lower than, again, in 2021, 2022, when it was all very new and we were learning a lot more about it. But when it comes to the formula, the mix, is there a certain time of year where they, the bigger powers that be say, okay, this is what it's going to look like to try to combat X strain, Y strain, Z strain?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. And when they're manufacturing the vaccine, they'll try and update the vaccine to the circulating strain. But again, it's an arms race and it's a losing battle, right? The virus is going to continue to mutate, and then you're going to create a vaccine to try match that, and then it's going to continue to mutate and not match it as perfectly as you would like. But regardless of the vaccine, they all still do a remarkable job in reducing the risk of severe infection, especially in those who are at greatest risk for severe infection. And you know what? And you made another really good point. You mentioned like the uptake isn't as high as it was before, nor should it be. Remember, the advice from the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, NACI, has changed over time. Initially, the recommendations were, listen, everyone should really be going to get this vaccine. Now the recommendations are really, you're categorized into two big groups. There's should get the vaccine, and there's may get the vaccine. We're not going to stop you. You can if you want. You can have a conversation with your doctor about whether it's right for you. But those are the may group. The should group are, yeah, we really think you should get this because you're at risk for severe infection. And the should group is really people over the age of 65, especially people over 80 who are the most vulnerable. And then people with underlying health conditions like immunocompromising states or very severe lung or heart disease. These are individuals where if they got a COVID-19 infection, they're more likely to land in hospital compared to others in the general public. They're sadly more likely to die compared to members of the general public. So that's why they're in the should get vaccinated category, and everyone else is in the may get vaccinated category.
I remember we talked maybe every other day during the height of the pandemic. You were so gracious with your time to share your knowledge and any updated information you have. It feels like the COVID conversation, a lot of people, it's a tune-out factor now because they had so much in the beginning and all this information thrown their way. Is that fair to say? Like when you're having these conversations, are people just in one ear and out the other, and they're like, yeah, it's just another bug?
Yeah, and I think it's fair. I mean, listen, we don't want to forget that this ever happened. I think it's extremely important to remember how awful some years were, and we would do a complete disservice ignoring that and forgetting that and learning from that so that we can be prepared. God forbid this happens again. And we know something like this is going to happen again. The question is when and what's the pathogen, but we will see other pandemics. That's a certainty. I think some people are very quick to put this in the rearview mirror, and that's unfortunate. There's obviously a lot that we can learn from it, but I think there's others that are also keen to hold on to 2021 for some reason, and I'm each to their own, and everyone's going to have their own risk threshold, risk tolerance, and that's okay. But it's obviously a different world in 2025 than it was in 2020, and I would even say it's a much different world in 2025 than it is compared to 2022. And you can tell. I mean, people are out and about. Our hospitals are not overwhelmed by a single pathogen as we once saw it. And of course, people still get this infection. No one wants to get this infection, but it's not packing at a population level as nearly as strong a punch as it once did. And that's because of two reasons. Number one, we rolled out vaccines, and many people, in fact, the vast majority of Canadians who were eligible were vaccinated for COVID. That did a lot. And in addition to that, while we don't want anyone to get infected with COVID, virtually everybody's been infected at least once with this and has recovered from the virus. And again, you just can't ignore the immunity and protection that you get, mostly protecting from severe illness through vaccination and through recovery from infection, obviously with the caveat that you don't want anyone to get this, but it happened likely multiple times, and it happened at a global level.
It's the July 4th sale at Bray & Scarf, going on now with huge savings throughout the store. Save up to 40% on GE Profile and Cafe appliances. Or step up to luxury with free installation on select Monogram appliances. Special financing is available. Shop local and save this July 4th at Bray & Scarf. Visit any of our convenient locations or go to brayandscarf.com, where it doesn't cost more to get more.
Let's talk about the other stuff, because it's easy to look at this one variant because you see the headlines and people have all the questions, but there are so many other things that are making their ways into the hospitals, which you are experiencing. I mean, we actually did an episode recently about some of the measles outbreaks as of late. What are you seeing in your practice or in the hospitals that maybe people aren't talking about?
This is interesting because you never want to jinx anything. You always have to stay humble. You always have to keep your eyes open. But oh God, this is going to burn me.
Oh,
but
no.
Fortunately, you don't want to say the Q word, but it's a little bit quiet at the moment, at least from a respiratory virus standpoint. And again, you always got to be on your toes. You always got to remain humble, and you always have to be open-minded for emerging pathogens and whatnot. But currently influenza levels have plummeted, and we're seeing very little, if any, influenza activity at the moment from our seasonal influenza that really wound down in February and March. Respiratory syncytial virus is not really circulating all that much. COVID levels are down significantly, and we saw COVID throughout the winter months, and they're down now, and they're stable for the time being. But if you look at the last couple of years, COVID rates tended to rise in the summer months. And I don't think anyone would be surprised if we saw a rise in cases, in the summer months here of COVID. Although, like the flu, we always say it could be predictably unpredictable as well. So I just think we need to be open-minded to that. And in terms of other circulating stuff, there's some summer viruses that do circulate. They're called enteroviruses. They're pretty common in the summertime. And, you mentioned measles. Obviously, Ontario is in the midst of a large measles outbreak. Having said that, there are early indications that it is settling down. And, you can't treat measles like, sometimes the reporting on this was a little odd in that people were thinking everyone's at risk for this infection. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We know that those born in Canada before 1970 already, the vast majority of them had been infected and recovered from measles. So almost all the infections are in those born after 1970. And then again, you look at the vaccine status of people infected with measles, especially in kids and young adults. And, the risk of infection in a child or a young adult who's been vaccinated for measles is negligible. It's negligible. So, some parents were worried about sending their kids to summer camp. I mean, if your child is fully vaccinated with the routine childhood immunizations, is the risk 0%? No, of course not. Nothing in this world has a 0% risk, but it's a negligible risk in those situations.
I'm thinking about, with the summer months, there's a lot of travel. And so perhaps more opportunity for people to, I say the bugs because I'm not you. I'm not the medical expert. But to pick up those bugs elsewhere, is that something that you see in the summer months where, you sort of track the travel and go, oh, that's where it started?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that's important too is, and again, thanks for bringing this up. For people listening, this was totally not scripted. But there is a lot of travel in the summer, and people travel all over the world, including to tropical and subtropical destinations. And it's really important to remember that there's infections there that just don't exist here that can really ruin your trip. And many of these are preventable infections. One of them is mosquito-transmitted infections like dengue fever, which can be miserable. And there's tons of dengue all over the world. There's actually the last 2 years have seen record-breaking levels of dengue. It's transmitted by a mosquito, and people feel really, really crummy with this one. And again, you can avoid this with insect repellents, and those are pretty good, staying in air-conditioned places as well. The other thing to remember too is many parts of the world have malaria, and malaria can be a potentially deadly infection. It's easily preventable by taking some tablets. And it's just important before you go on a trip to speak with a travel health specialist to just ask, hey, is there anything I can do to prevent infection and have a healthy, safe, and happy trip? And sometimes it might be a vaccine or two. Other times it might be malaria tablets, but it's very important to seek this help before you go to ensure that people stay healthy on the trip. And sorry, I know this is a long-winded answer, but closer to home in Canada, it's tick season. And we certainly start to see an uptick, not intended, sort of intended, in tick-transmitted illnesses, especially in the summertime. Now, listen, we are blessed in Canada by living in the greatest country on the planet and having the most beautiful summers on the planet. And I hope everyone goes outside and enjoys the summer months as much as possible. It just means when you're coming indoors, do a tick check, okay? That means look at your legs, have someone look at the back of your legs if you can't see that area well. Ticks can be picked off pretty easily before they are embedded. It also means putting on insect repellent if you're in tick country. Usually tall grass and forested areas are where ticks like to hang out. But there are tick-transmitted illnesses in Canada. The most common one is Lyme. And again, not hard to prevent, not hard to diagnose, not hard to treat. Let's just be aware of it and enjoy our summer.
Wow, you know what? You brought up a bunch of different things that I wasn't even thinking about. But as we go into these summer months, yeah, you're outside, you're traveling, you're doing all the good stuff. And now that you've used that Q word, Dr. Bogoch, we hopefully, knock on wood, aren't going to see ourselves in some trouble. Some final words that you have for any of our listeners. Again, they're looking to health, they want to have fun, but they want to be protected. What is your overarching message heading into these months?
Have the best summer, enjoy it, be outside as much as possible. Bug spray goes a long way. And if you're traveling to a tropical or subtropical place, it's best to speak with the travel health specialist before you go so you can have a healthy, safe, and happy trip.
Beautiful. And one final word, again, if you're watching these headlines about this latest variant, there is no need to really freak out about it. Again, unless you are immunocompromised or you have underlying issues, this is just yet another strain that we are looking at. Yes?
Oh, yeah. If people want to know what this is going to look like, this is the NB181. It's going to look like everything you saw over the last 3 years. So it's still around. It could still make someone feel miserable. It can still make people vulnerable to severe infection, rather ill. But there's nothing new. The vaccines are still out there. The recommendation is for people to be vaccinated. We have the should category and the may category. Vaccines will be more available in the fall months. I hope people have a wonderful summer.
Beautiful. This is what we like to hear. Dr. Bogoch, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Melanie.
And that was The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all of your favorite podcast players. Don't forget to rate, you can review, you can follow, and of course, share. I'm Melanie Ng. Thank you so much for listening.